Hi everyone, welcome to Build a Single Page App with Lightning Components. I'm William Ye, ISV Technical Evangelist here at Salesforce. Been on the team for about 4.5 years now, providing technical enablement and help partners building solutions on the platform. Joining me today is Rodrigo Rebucas. He's also a technical evangelist on my team, who will be showing most of the demo and the components today. Okay, so forward-looking statement. Most of you should be pretty familiar with the slide. In short, we ask that you do not make any purchasing decision based on the content we'll be showing today. And go social. We have all these different social channels that you can follow to get the latest and greatest. All the recordings will be on YouTube as well for you to review. And if you have any questions, don't wait till the end. You can post your questions onto the GoToWebinar. We will collect them and answer them or share them on a separate Q&A post after the sessions. And lastly, if you have any additional question on top of it, you can go to our developer forums. People are active over there to help answer or guide you to correct resources. So for today's webinar, we will mostly revolve around a Lightning component called SendOffer. And so we figure it's a good way to kind of start with the little intro on why we built it and what its main use case is like. That way we can kind of go into deeper on the technology behind it. We will kind of go into the single page application itself. This is more of a core concept that's pretty common nowadays for modern web development, but for people switching from a Visualforce page, it might be something to think about. Next, we will go into the Lightning-based components. So these are some of the building blocks we use to create the Lightning component itself, along with Lightning events, mainly used for the communication between all the different components involved in this main component. And lastly, how we dynamically create Lightning components. After that, I will pass over to Rodrigo to do the end-to-end demo of our SendOffer Lightning component, as well as diving deeper into the code itself and how we wire everything up together. Don't worry if you can't follow the demo, code line by line. We will be sharing all the resources along with the source code on GitHub, so you can clone and fork it to use it as your own or prototype. So the SendOffer Lightning component. Before we talk about the component, it might be good to talk about the background itself. So when we first built the recruitment application, this is a application built by the SV Tech Evangelist team to mostly use as a reference design. So any new technologies that come out on Salesforce, we kind of test it around the use case because we want to have a full solution kind of perspective. So we built this recruitment app that is fully Lightning ready, using most of the metadata. It handles, candidates, interview process, and even creating an offer that will be sent to the candidate. And this is where the SendOffer Lightning component comes in. The SendOffer Lightning components provide an easy way for you to construct and send your offer letter. Because once you have all the offer information, you actually need to draft it and be able to deliver it to the candidate who will be reviewing it. So there's really 4 stages that we identify with the SendOffer Lightning component. The first stage is detail, which shows the recruiter or hiring manager the actual salary and compensation information. Then we have the edit view, which is kind of like an email drafting view, where you can see the header of the email and with all the data plugged into that email template. Next, we have a review, where it's like a final review of the letter itself. Once we go through that, then you will send an email and see whether or not the message was successfully sent out. Now, traditionally, when you have a multi-stage process or flow in Salesforce, you would build 4 Visualforce pages and jump into them using page reference. However, that's not very efficient because every time you're switching to the next UI or the previous UI, you would need to make a call to the server and get the page served up to you again. this is where single page application comes in. So with single page application, the main concept is that you're building an app inside your browser, your page, and that reduce the need to constantly reload the page or pulling a new page in, since you have all the UI components in there already, and all you need to do is to make a call to insert or update your data. And so that's exactly what we did here. Most of the single page application nowadays are built with JavaScript, CSS, and Ajax. And some of the best example I can give you is Salesforce Lightning Experience and Salesforce One. If you notice, both of these new UI that we provided, they first have a short preload, and once the app or the page is loaded, you don't really see any redirections, right? Everything runs within the UI experience, and at most we might pull additional data from the backend, but you don't have to go through the refresh, which is time consuming. So I figured before we start the actual demo, to give you guys a little bit preview on the component itself. So on the left hand side, this is our SendOffer Lightning component. As you can see on the upper left hand, it's the first view, the detailed view, where you can see the salary, the bonus, and the email template that we'll be using. And then on the lower left-hand side, you see the edit view, which is the email draft that we're about to send out with all the data pulled in. Now notice there are two very different UI setup, which is why I meant by how normally people would kind of go straight to the two Visualforce pages and have them navigate between each other. But with our Lightning component, we actually have this nested setup with all the components pre-built in, but just showing and hiding the correct ones. So as you can see on the right-hand side with the bigger screen, we have a parent Lightning component, which is the actual offer letter Lightning component. There's a send offer button, and there's that chevron progress bar, which is static because you will see it throughout the whole lifecycle. But we have 4 sub Lightning components within it: the offer details Lightning component, offer template, offer preview, and offer confirm. And depending on which stage you're in, we will be showing and hiding the related Lightning component using CSS. So we will set up the show and hide of it respectively, and that's how you provide the correct UI to the user at each stage. Now we'll switch gear into a little bit on the different building blocks we use. So Lightning-based component. This is a awesome new addition to the platform. Traditionally, when you create a new button in UI for Lightning Experience, you will first set up the HTML markup, apply the Salesforce Lightning design system, and wire them up using JavaScript. With the Lightning-based component, it eliminates the need to do that. Now you can just simply reference Lightning input, Lightning select to get pick list dropdowns. You can use Lightning text area to provide you a full text area, or even buttons to easily wire up your action. But it really helps you to accelerate the development process for Lightning. And we handle all the styling stuff for you as well, so you don't have to deal with updating the Salesforce Lightning design system from time to time. Next is the Lightning events. Rodrigo will talk more about this, but essentially I want to highlight that we are using 2 types of events for this Lightning component. One is the application event, which is more locally within the Lightning component we have. So we're using that to pass data between the children components. Now, remember from the previous screenshots, we have 4 sub-Lightning components within this parent. And so we need to make sure that all 4 of the Lightning components can fire events and talk to each other so that they get the latest and the correct data. With the component event itself, we're using that mainly to show and hide the Lightning components. So there's a what we call the bubbling setup, which is pretty much like a sequential setup of all these components, so that we know whenever we go next stage, it's hiding the current component and showing the next component. Or if we go previous, then we're hiding the current component by going a stage up to show the previous component. Lastly, we are also dynamically creating components within our parent component. So you might ask, why would you want to do that? Often this actually gives you more flexibility because you can define the data or user interaction based on what's previously given to you. So for example, if after 3 stages of interaction, there's certain changes to the data that you need to display a different user interface or a whole different type of user interaction for the end user, then your component can react at runtime, because the moment you generate it, you have the latest information for them instead of having to make multiple calls or events fired into the component just to make it update itself and reflect to the latest version. So there's definitely pros when, in some cases, to dynamically create a component instead of relying on all these firing events to change them. And Rodrigo will show you more on that as well. And now I'll pass it over to Rodrigo, where he'll go over the end-to-end demo of the Lightning component.
All right, thanks, William. So to start off our demo, I want to show you guys the recruitment application that our team has built to share different types of Lightning components and best practices with customers and partners. So here you see our recruitment application loaded in the Lightning experience. And I can see here a candidate record detail page, right? So I'm going to play a role of a recruiter that basically, let's say our candidate has gone through a full round of interviews and we're ready to extend an offer to this candidate. So I'm going to click on this Send Offer button here on the top right. And that is an object-specific action that is going to open our Lightning component, our Send Offer Lightning component, inside a modal window. So there you go. So now me as a recruiter, I can start filling out the information on this first stage here, the detail stage. And this is where William showed that what you guys see down here, this container, this is a child Lightning component inside our parent. So let's start as a recruiter, including some values here. So let's put the salary, a salary value, a bonus value. And then I'm going to use this pick list to choose an offer letter template. And this is using regular Salesforce email templates. So let's choose this one, for example. And now let's click on next. And you notice that this child component will disappear and the next one in our flow will become visible. So there you go. So on this added child Lightning component, we now have our offer letter basically merged with the fields that we entered on that first one. So now we have the subject with the position name. We have here on the offer letter body, we have the candidate's name, the position name as well, the annual salary value, the bonus value, and the user. This is a text area, so the user is able to make changes if needed before proceeding. Or they can also click on this back button to go back to the first child Lightning component and choose some other values, right? So let's pretend that we're happy with the way that our offer letter works so far, looks so far. Let's click on this next button. And here we have the fourth child Lightning component visible inside our parent, which is that review, represents the review stage. So here we have our offer letter, but with read-only fields. So this is a last opportunity for the recruiter to take a look at the offer letter before they finally click on confirm and send, this button here. And at this particular moment, our Lightning component is making a call to our server-side Apex controller, and we're using Apex to send the offer letter that we just created to the candidate. So here you see that inside this last child Lightning component, we are showing basically a success icon and then a send result message. And also the user is able to click on this open offer button, because behind the scenes, we created an offer record and we associated, we basically added the offer letter that we just created as an activity related to that offer record. All right. So this is basically how our send offer component works, but I want to open it again because you guys may be wondering, so how did we make this, whenever we open the parent component, how did we make this only the first child visible, right? So let's take a look at the code for our parent Lightning component to take a look at how we did that. Let's go here to our code. Our parent component is called offer letter SPA, and here is its markup. And notice here at the beginning, we have some markup for our progress bar, which shows up here on this upper part. And by the way, we use some code samples from Salesforce Lightning Design System from its website to build that. And here at the very bottom, we have different HTML div tags. Inside each div, we're referencing the different child Lightning components that we want to show at different stages inside our single page application. So here we have a div with the offer details child, which is the one that we just saw that we entered the salary and the bonus. We have another div with the offer template child, which is the one that brings back the offer letter with all the fields merged, field values merged, so we can make changes and see if it looks good. We have another div with the offer preview child, which is the one that has those read-only fields, the last minute check, and then another div with the confirm child, which is the last child Lightning component where we show the success icon in the send results message. So you may wonder, how come when we open our parent, only the offer details child is visible, right? So I figured the approach we use to hide all the other child Lightning components in our parent. So whenever our parent initializes, we have here a handler to the Lightning system event init, which fires after a component initializes. And whenever that happens, this line of code, so the do init action on our parent JavaScript controller is going to execute. So let's take a look at what that does. So here's our do init. And basically, the approach we're using to hide those other child components that shouldn't be visible at this particular stage is we are instantiating local JavaScript variables, and we're using component.find to find the HTML divs where the components that should be invisible live by its RID. And then we're using this a.util.add class to add a CSS class to that HTML div. So this CSS class, I'm going to show you the code to you guys in a minute, basically makes the HTML div where the other children live invisible. So let's take a look real quick of on how these what's inside this toggle class. So here's the toggle class. It basically is setting the CSS display attribute on those divs to none. So that's how we are making them invisible. All right, so that's the approach we use to hide the other components. Now I want to go back to our Lightning component and just spend a little bit of time here showing the building blocks that we use to build this first child. So this first child here, it's called offer details. So let's go take a look at the code. Offer details CMP, here it's markup. So notice here that we have two input fields, one for the salary and one for the bonus. And to speed up our development, we took advantage and we used this new Lightning-based component called Lightning Input, right? So that's a special Lightning-based component that just came out that lets you set the type attribute. So in our case, we set it as a number since we're working with numbers, and some other very cool attributes that you can play around to use it. So before, like William mentioned, before this Lightning-based components, you probably had to create an HTML regular input field, bake in JavaScript, CSS, which makes the development harder. But with these new Lightning-based components, Salesforce has already done this for you. So all you have to do is set these different attributes values. So if you want to take a look at all the Lightning-based components that are available currently, I would recommend going to the Lightning Components Developers Guide. And we're going to share these links in our deck. But basically, if you search for base components, you see this list of all the Lightning-based components that are currently available for you to use. So here we have some for input, another ones for visual components. And here, right at the bottom, we have our Lightning inputs-based component, which is the one that we're using, which is especially designed for web forms. So how do we know, how do we know all the different attributes that are available inside Lightning Input, right? So there are two different ways of looking at a Lightning component documentation, a standard component documentation. So the first way is you can go to the same Lightning Components Developers Guide and search for the component name with its namespace. So Lightning Input, you get here to the search results, and you see this is the documentation page for Lightning Input. Looks like it's currently in beta, but here you can see all the different attributes that you can set. For example, the type attribute, where we had set as number. If we had chosen checkbox, it would render a checkbox instead of an input control for numbers. And same thing, if you set it as date, it would render a date picker and so on. So you can play around, take a look at all these examples. There are some code samples here too that are really helpful. There's another way to check the documentation of Lightning components that I really like, which is by going to your developers org and opening another tab. And if you put Aura Docs, and then if you I just put the anchor link here to load it directly, but I put pound reference. So this loads this very cool Lightning application that lives inside every Salesforce org that shows you on this left panel here all the Lightning applications, components, interfaces, events, libraries, and JavaScript APIs that are available for you guys to use during your Lightning components development. So if you expand the components, you see here under the Lightning namespace all the Lightning-based components that are available for me to use inside my developer org. And here is my input, Lightning input. So if I click on top of that, I'll get to the documentation page of Lightning input here in our docs, which has very similar content to what you guys saw on the Lightning components developers guide. So let's go back to our first child here. Going down the list, we have these pick list now, right? And let's take a look at the code real quick. We're also using a Lightning-based component called Lightning Select to build that pick list and speed up development. And inside that Lightning Select, we are dynamically creating these option tags, which are the options that show inside our Lightning Select, our pick list. And we're using Aura iteration to loop through a collection of email templates. And then we're adding these options to that pick list dynamically whenever our component renders, our first child renders. And then going down here, the next building block is this button, right? The next button, which we're also using another Lightning-based component called Lightning Button. So you can see how Lightning-based components really help you speed up your development, right? And for this Lightning button, we have set the label as next. And whenever the user clicks on the next button, we're going to execute this local JavaScript controller action called handle next click. And this is what I want to show you guys next. So let's go to our local JavaScript controller. Here's handle next click. Basically, we're setting the value of the salary, the bonus, and the template ID to local Lightning components attributes. And then we're calling a helper action called create offer and navigate. So let's go there. So create offer and navigate. So basically what we do, I'm not gonna go through all the code, but basically we're making a call to our server-side controller to create a temporary offer record. And whenever we receive the success message from our server-side controller that the offer record was created successfully, we're starting the offer ID on a variable, and then we're going to fire a special type of Lightning event that we mentioned that we call bubbling event to basically notify our parent Lightning component that the user is done entering and playing around with this first child. So we should make this first child invisible and the next child Lightning component in our flow visible. So I want to show you how this Lightning event looks. So before doing that, let's go back to our offer details, which is the first child's markup. Notice here that on line 11, we have, we're registering that we're going to fire this bubbling event of type C offer span notifier event. So this is a custom Lightning event that we created with this specific purpose of notifying parent that something needs to happen, in our case, so the parent can control the navigation. Let's take a quick look at the markup of these custom lightning event. So notice here that this is another event of type component, right? And as William mentioned, this type of lightning event is perfect for this use case where we want to send a message or some data from a child lightning component to a parent lightning component in a nested components hierarchy like we have here in our single page app. So basically, we're choosing the type as component, and we have defined that this lightning event has one attribute that these components that are going to fire, it can set the value, right? So the attribute's name is component action and is of type string. So let's see how the first child lightning component use this lightning event and set these special attribute whenever the user clicks on that next button. So back to our first child helper. So whenever the user clicks on that next button, we're basically going to instantiate that bubbling event. And then we're going to set the parameters, that component action parameter that we just saw of our event with a specific message. In our case, the value is offer details next. So this way we can fire it on the next line of code, 108. And now this event is going to bubble up to the outermost parent in our component hierarchy here. So let's see what happens at the parent level whenever it handles this bubbling event. Let's go back here to our offer letter SPA, which is our parent's markup. Notice here that it has an R handler to be able to handle that bubbling event. And whenever it receives that bubbling event from a child, it's going to basically execute this handle bubbling JavaScript action on the local JavaScript controller in the parent level. So let's take a look at what that does. To handle bubbling, we basically grab the event parameters to a local JavaScript variable, and then we take a look at what each child sent inside that component action attribute, right? So now we grab it to a local JavaScript attribute, and next, in order to control navigation, we're going to use this switch statement. If you guys are used to JavaScript development, so we're going to use a switch statement to, based on the message that was sent by the different children in our single page app, based on each of the message, we're going to execute a case statement that is going to basically, in our case, we want to show and hide different child components. So it's basically going to use that same approach that we use whenever our parent first initialize of using component.find to find the div of the component that should be invisible, assign it to a local variable, and use a.u2.addClass to add that same toggle class, as you guys may recall, that sets the div visibility to none display. So we're going to do that to hide that offer details first child where the user entered the salary and the bonus. And we're going to do, now we need to unhide the next child lightning component in our flow. So we're basically going to use a similar approach. We're going to use component.find to find the div that holds the second child. But now we're going to use a.u2.remove class, not add class, because we need to remove the toggle class to make when we first initialize visible at real time. Also down here, you notice that when we move to the next lightning component in our flow, that progress bar indicator is going to change. So the detail is going to change to green, and the next one is going to be blue to indicate progress. So basically, we're using a similar approach. We're using component.find to find each of these nodes by its RID, and then we're going to remove the CSS, the Salesforce Lightning Design System class that would set that node as current, and we're going to add class a.util.add class to add another CSS class that marks it as complete. So that's why it changes to green. And then that's how we are able to change this one to blue and events in our flow, right? So that's basically the approach we use to control navigation in our single page application. So going back to our component, you notice that the user enters some values here on the first child, and it's probably going to make some changes and enter more values here on the second child. And at the very end, as you may recall, we're going to send the offer letter by email. So we needed a way that the different children could share information, share data between themselves, right? So at the very last step, we could send like call to the server side controller to send the offer letter. So what the approach that we use to that, to accomplish that, was to use another type of Lightning event called Lightning application events. Let's take a look at that. So here, let's go back to our first child component helper. Actually, let's take a look at the markup, and just to show you guys that here on line 10, we're registering that we're going to fire this Lightning application event of type c.candidate detail event. So this is the Lightning event, a custom Lightning event that we created, and I'm going to show you guys the code real quick, with this specific purpose of sharing data between child Lightning components in our flow. So let's go straight to the Lightning event code so you can see how that looks. So notice here at the very top that it's an R event of type application now. So it's not component as it was the type of our bubbling event. So Lightning events of type application are perfect for this use case where you need to share data or information between components that are not necessarily parents of each other. So they don't even need to live on the same namespace for you to be able to use these Lightning application events to share and receive data. All you have to do is to register that you want to receive, you want to handle this type of Lightning events on the event that needs the data. So basically, inside this Lightning event, we define all these different attributes. Basically, it's a data structure. So we have an attribute to identify the Lightning component who fired the event, one for the candidate ID, salary, bonus, and so on. So basically, the goal here is that each child in our single page app is going to use this Lightning application event to populate these attributes so the other child component in our flow can receive this information and fire it again with more information. So basically increment this data structure with all the information that is captured on the different stages in our single page app. Let's go back to the first child's helper, because I want to show you how we do that. How do we fire this Lightning event with information so the other child can grab it? So basically, after we fire that bubbling event, we're going to instantiate this Lightning application event that we just saw. And we're going to set its parameters. So we're going to set the candidate ID with the candidate ID that we grabbed from the candidate record detail page, with the salary and the bonus and so on. And notice that we don't have to necessarily add values to all those attributes that we saw that are defined in our Lightning event, just the ones that we actually have the information for it. And then we finally fire this Lightning application event. And the next component, which is this edit here, which is called offer template, is going to receive that information from that first child. Let's see how it does that. So let's go to offer template, which is this second child component. And notice here that it has also a handler to, it's registering for that Lightning application event. And whenever it receives that Lightning application event, it's going to execute this local JavaScript controller action called handle application event. So let's take a look at what it does. So handle application event basically grab the event parameters, right? The data that was shared by that first child, and sets to local Lightning component attributes. So the user can see this information here, and then whenever they click on next, where this component is going to actually reuse, it's going to fire the same type of Lightning application event, but now with more information. So the next child can grab the incremental information that the user is entering. All right, so I want to show you guys a quick visualization of what we just saw in code. So here in blue, we have our parent component, offer letter SPA. And in green, we have the first child Lightning component that is available for user to enter the salary and the bonus information. So notice that here on this blue circle, we're representing that Lightning bubbling event with the specific message that this child is going to fire, and is going to pass to the parent component using that bubbling event. So whenever it fires that event, that bubbles up to the parent, and the parent then uses that approach of dynamically hiding and showing the next child component using CSS. So that happens throughout our single page application. All the child use that same bubbling event, but this time they pass different messages. So offer template next, which bubbles up to the parent, that switch statement, and then we use the same approach to hide and show the next Lightning component that should be visible. Here on this diagram, the first child offer details is instantiating that Lightning application event with this information in brown, right? So candidate ID, email, salary, bonus, and template ID. And then it's going to fire the Lightning event, and the next child in our flow is going to handle that Lightning event. And then it's going to do some different things with the information that I just received, and then it's going to fire that same Lightning event, candidate detail event, but now adding this information of these attributes in green, so offer ID and offer letter. And whenever that happens, so basically this is the approach that we took to take this information to all the different children in our single page app. And notice that we're not making one single call to our server-side controller to store this information, right? We're doing everything locally on the client side, which means our Lightning component becomes faster instead of going to the server. So we're using the Lightning framework's component mechanisms for that. So when we receive all the incremental information using this same Lightning application event on the last child component, then we finally make a call to our Salesforce org, to our server-side controller, to send the offer letter by email to the candidate. And then whenever that happens, our server-side controller sends back the send results, if the offer letter was sent successfully or not. And that's what we see on that last child component that has that green icon. And speaking of this component, let's take a look real quick, because I want to spend just a little bit of time showing the approach we use to build this last child here, which is that offer confirm child component. So notice that it has an icon indicating success. It also has the message indicating if the offer letter was sent successfully to the candidate or not, and it has that button. But I want to show you guys what the approach we use to build this icon, because you may wonder, okay, so we're showing like a success icon, but what if the send results were not successful, right? What if the email had not been sent correctly to the candidate? We probably don't want to show an icon that indicates success, right? So the approach we use for that is we use this approach of dynamically creating Lightning components, which again, you guys can take a look. We're going to share the links. There are some very cool examples on the Lightning Components Developers Guide, but we use this approach to build the icon. And let me show you the code real quick. So this is our offer confirm. That's the last child's Lightning Components markup. And notice that whenever we, on the place of the markup that we are supposed to show that icon, we added this v.body tag here, brackets. And this acts basically as a placeholder for a JavaScript code to push markup here, in our case, our Lightning icon, from the JavaScript side. And like William mentioned, this is really useful because we want to basically decide which icon we want to show based on the send results. So let's see here, let's go to our controller, actually to our helper, to see how we did that. So I'm not going to go through all the details, but basically this makes a call to the server-side controller that sends the email. And whenever the server-side controller returns a message indicating if the email was sent or not, we are going to create, using this a.create component line of code, we're going to create a lightning icon. And this is another lightning-based component that we're using to create our icon. I just want to show you guys real quick what is inside that. So under my lightning namespace here, this is the icon lightning component that we're going to create programmatically. And if you look at the attributes, one of the attributes that we're going to define is the icon name, which is a lightning design system name of the icon that we wanted to create. So if you go to lightning design system and click on icons, so lightningdesignsystem.com/icons, you see all the collection of icons that you can choose to build that lightning icon, for example. So let's go back to our code and see how we created that icon dynamically. So basically here on this line of code, after we receive the response from our server-side controller, we have an if statement that checks if the email was sent successfully. So if the email was sent successfully to the candidate, we are going to show this action approval icon. So looking back at Salesforce Lightning Design System, this is the action collection, and this is the approval icon. So that's the icon that we want to show if the offer letter was sent successfully. Otherwise, we have an else statement that defines that the icon, if the email was not sent successfully, we want to show this action close style. So that would be this icon here that is going to show up if the offer letter was not sent successfully by email. All right, so we do that. So you notice that we're deciding the style that we want to show in our lightning icon dynamically here in JavaScript. And then we're going to use that a.create component, special method of the Lightning Components framework, to create our lightning icon. So the first parameter is the name of the lightning component that we want to create. And inside those brackets are the attributes that we want to set on that lightning-based component. So we're setting the RID, and the icon name now is going to reflect the style that we just chose that we want to use based on the data that returned from the server-side controller. So hopefully it's going to show that green circle with a check mark indicating success. And the other attribute that we're choosing for our lightning icon is the size. So we're setting the size attribute as medium. And next, the next attribute parameter of our a.create component is a function that we need to add. And if the status equals success, we're basically going to use JavaScript to use component.get to get our child component's body. And then we're going to use body.push to push this new icon that we're creating dynamically to the component body that it currently lives on this JavaScript variable. And then we're going to use component.set to set the new body of our lightning component of this child with the body that includes now the lightning component that we're creating programmatically. So whenever this will create the lightning icon that we're creating programmatically, exactly on this place here in our lightning components markup where we have v.body. All right. So this is, again, pretty useful for when you guys have here, if you look at this example on the far right, we have, for example, let's pretend that you have a list component, so list.cmp as a parent. And let's suppose that you want to create list rows, which are child components of the list dynamically using the same approach we just saw based on the data that comes back from the server. So here's an example. So if the data that we want to show in our list row is supposed to be read-only to the user, we're going to create a row without the edit link. So the user is not able to edit that line that record on our list because they have read-only access. And then we're going to use that same approach of dynamically creating components to basically set that v.body in our components markup. So here is an example. We just created a list row only with the view link. So the user is not able to edit that particular list row. Otherwise, if the user had access to edit the record, we would create a row now with the edit button. So you see how this becomes really useful, and this gives you a lot of flexibility, right? So this is why we want to show you guys this new way, this alternate way of creating Lightning Components markup dynamically. All right, so this brings me to our resources slide. And like I mentioned, you guys will be able to use these links whenever we post the deck and to go to the pages directly that we just showed previously. But basically, there's a link to that list on the Lightning Components Developers Guide that has the list of all the currently available Lightning-based components, and that list is only going to grow over time. And second one is a list to the Lightning Events page of our Lightning Components Developers Guide that shows the different types of Lightning events that are available and when to use each type. Number 3 here is a page on the same guide that shows that approach that we use of showing and hiding Lightning Components markup dynamically with CSS. Number 4 is more examples and details of how you can create Lightning Components markup dynamically, like we showed that we build that icon. And finally, we're making all this code of our SendOffer Lightning component available on our GitHub repository. So please feel free to go to our repository using this link and fork the code, customize it, make it your own, and add it to your developer orgs as well. And also provide us feedback. That's really helpful. So if you guys haven't heard of Trailhead, it's a new fun way to learn Salesforce. It's a very engaging, interactive, and free training website that you can access by going to trailhead.salesforce.com. And there's a special training module called Lightning Components Basics that I highly recommend you guys to take, which covers most of the things that we talked during today's webinar, and also other important pieces and concepts that are important for Lightning Components developers. So definitely take this Trailhead training module and earn this badge. And we're interested in hearing your feedback regarding today's webinar. So please use this survey link to provide us feedback regarding our webinar, because our goal is to make it always even better. Thank you all for joining.